Hi guys and welcome back to my channel. So today we're doing an endgame lesson and it's going to be a rook and a pawn versus a rook. And the pawn is on the 7th rank and it's a rook pawn. So it could be on the A file or on the H file. So most of you guys probably know about this endgame. So that's why I'm going to include also the pawns on the other side of the board here, what happens, what's the result and everything. But first I just want to make that clear that this endgame here is a draw, just in case you don't know it. And I think it's useful to just remind you of this endgame. So how can black draw here? You can see that first thing that black has to do is keep an eye on this pawn here, because now the rook can't move, because black would just take, black would just take the pawn, and that's of course a draw. So the rook has to be here attacking this pawn, so white's rook can't move. Now the second very important thing is that you need to have the king on g7 or h7. These are the only two squares of the board here where you can have your king to draw this game. But why is that? Okay, let's see what happens if you have your king anywhere else than on these two squares. Let's just give white a move. If you move your king, for example, here on this square, which is not a safe square, these two squares are safe, but this one is not, because now white can give you a check, and when you move, he's going to promote to a queen and or to a rook, if you like it more. Both is winning, and he's going to just win the game. So you don't want this, right? And you might say, why can't I have my king, for example, on this f7 square? Now he can't give me a check because I would just take his rook and to win the game. Now here's a trick. He can move his rook to this h8 square. And the point is that he's going to promote to a queen, so you have to take this pawn. You can't do anything else. You know he's going to promote to a queen. So you have to take the pawn, and now you can see the move. Rook to h7, check. And you're going to have to move, and he's going to take your rook. Now this is really a dirty trick that you must not fall for, because it's very painful. So just remember, put your king on this g7 square or on this h7 square. Now the situation may change if you have some pawns here. Then you could hide your king, for example, here on f6 from checks. But okay, we don't have any pawns here, so that's the situation. But how can white even try to win the game? Well, he's hardly going to do anything if you just move your king to h7 and g7 and your rook here and here on this file, just attacking this pawn. You just have to do this as black. But white is still trying to win the game, right? So his plan would be that he moves his king, for example, up. And for example, if you do nothing here, he's going to go here. And if you still do nothing, the point is that he's going to defend this pawn, so he can move his rook, and now whatever you do, he's going to put his king there. So he's going to have shelter for his king to avoid the checks, and he's basically just going to play rook here, check, his king here, and then he's going to promote to a queen. So what is the point here? Like I said, with black, you just move your king here and your rook on this file. But the moment white touches this pawn, you have to check him. It's simple, you have to check him. Because if you don't, then we saw what happens, right? You have to check the white's king. So let's say white just tries to do this, because otherwise he's not going to make progress. He plays king to d5. And you just play your king to h7, like we said, just moving your king. And white plays king to c6. Now, of course, you can check him if you want already, but you're not in a hurry, because you can just play king to g7, and now when he touches the pawn, you check him. And the problem is that he has no shelter, he can't hide from checks, so he would have to, come to this rook to attack it, and that's not a problem. When he attacks you, you just go there, you just stay on this file, and there's no way for white to win the game. So you guys most probably know this endgame, but I covered it anyway. But okay, now we're going to go to this exact endgame, with an h pawn. And let's see what happens if white has this pawn here on the board. We can see I added this pawn here on h2, and let's see what happens. What do you think the result of the game would be here? Well, I gotta tell you that this is again a draw, and it's really simple. White could have, for example, 4 pawns here, and it would still be a draw. And let's see what's the point here. Now, White's plan could be probably to, move his king there and push his pawn to attack the king, because otherwise we saw he can't do anything here, because we're just going to wait here on this file, right? Let's for example play king to e3, and we just wait, right? We just wait. He plays h4. Of course, we can't move the rook to attack the pawn because then he's going to promote the queen on the next move. So we just wait. And he tries to do something here, and we don't even have to check him or anything. I mean, we can also check him, but I mean, we can just move to this h7 square and sit there. We just sit on this h7 square, and he can't do anything to us. Because as you can see, when he pushes the pawn forward, it's not going to attack our king, and our king is just going to sit there. And he can't push away our king with his rook because it's stuck. It can't move anywhere because we're just going to take this pawn. And his king also can't do anything. It's basically a dead draw. And if he tries to do some tricks, for example, if he tries to put his king here on f6, you can't take the pawn. You just move your rook here on the file and don't take this pawn, because like we said, this is not a safe square. These two squares are safe, and now he's going to give you a check and also mate in this case. So this is really bad. You just remember, don't take this pawn. These two squares are the safe squares for the king. So you just move your rook up and down, and like we saw, white can't do anything. The moment he touches the pawn, we check him, and this is just, he can't do anything. It's like, it's a dead draw. So let's look at what happens when white has his pawn on the g2 square. Let's see, on the g file. Yeah, that's right, you guessed it, it's again a draw. And the point is here, it's the exact same thing, but it's happening on the g file. And before it was happening on the h file. So now you just basically have to put your king on the g7 square to block this pawn from going up the board and promoting, and again you just move your rook here and do nothing. Now let's take a look at this again real quick. If he plays king to f3, now we can still move our king if we want, because this pawn is not that far advanced, and even if it was, I mean, it doesn't matter. We just move our king, and I mean, we can move our rook. We just stay on these two squares and on this file. That's the only thing we have to worry about. That's not a lot, right? That's only two things to remember. I mean, you'll get used to it if you aren't already. But okay, now white can't do anything again, like we saw. This is a draw again. And of course, if he moves there, don't take the pawn, just stay here. It's a complete draw. But the problem comes when white has an f pawn. Here things are really different, and let's take a look at this. If white has an f pawn, now you can probably see why is this a problem. But if you don't see it, we're just going to take a look at it, of course. Now in other examples we saw that when pawns were on these two files, our king can just block these pawns by standing on these two safe squares. But f7 square now to block this pawn is not a safe square, because he can again play rook here, and when we take the pawn, give us a check and take our rook. So that's a huge problem for black, but let's see if he can draw the game or not. Like we said, I mean, white pushes the pawn, because what else is he going to do, right? And we just, move our rook somewhere. White pushes the pawn. We just wait with our rook, and now you can already see he plays f6 check. And yeah, this is winning for white. Because if you move to f7 to block this pawn, like we said, we're going to win the game. I mean, we're not going to win the game. White is going to win the game, obviously. But okay, we can see this trick again, and white wins. So we can't move to this f7 square after the check. We also can't take the pawn because of a check. And now he gets to promote his pawn to a queen. And this is over, of course. White wins, like this, yeah. And we also can't move to our safe square here on h7, because now we can see that this pawn is passed and it's going to promote. He's going to play f7, and this is just over now. As you can see, if you play back your king here, I mean, he's just going to promote on the next move, so this is just over. So this is really bad news for black, and he can't do anything to stop this pawn from going. He can't even, you know, protect this square with his rook, because you never have the option of really taking this pawn, just going out of this file, because now he's going to move the rook, of course, because he doesn't have to defend this pawn here, because you're not attacking it, and he's going to, you know, just promote on the next move. So, when white has his pawn on the f file, it's winning. And it's really logical, and you're really going to get used to this if you play these positions, and if you just study them, you're quickly going to get used to it, and you're probably going to remember it quickly, just like I did, because it's really not that hard. And if white has a g pawn or an h pawn, then this is going to be a draw, and you're going to be happy at the end of the day. So guys, I hope that everything is clear here, that you understand this first position that we talked about, just standing with the rook on the same file as the pawn is, and just keeping your king on these two safe squares so white can't do any tricks here, or just make a check and then promote a queen. That's the only thing you have to worry about. And of course, when white touches the pawn, you just start checking him without stopping, and it's just going to be a draw. White can't do anything. I hope everything is clear, guys. Also, these examples with those pawns, I mean, I think they're pretty easy, and you're going to understand them. So thank you guys for watching. I hope you liked it. I would like to see some feedback in the comments, and I'll see you guys in the next video.